The story of Francis Heaulme is a descent into a unique form of evil, one that defies easy categorization. He was not a predator who hunted with cunning, nor a killer driven by rage or lust. He was instead a void, a man whose profound emotional emptiness manifested in random, explosive acts of violence that scarred the French countryside for nearly a decade. To understand Heaulme is to follow the path of a human storm, a force of nature that left a trail of senseless death in its wake, and to witness the brilliant, painstaking work of the man who finally mapped the storm's chaotic course. Francis Heaulme entered the world on February 12, 1949, in Sarreguemines, already marked for a life of hardship. He was born with craniosynostosis, a severe birth defect where the plates of his skull fused too early, threatening his brain development. His early childhood became a relentless cycle of hospitalizations and painful, invasive surgeries. These procedures, while life-saving, left him with a permanently deformed, asymmetrical head, a visible stamp of otherness that would define his interactions with the world. This physical trauma was compounded by a deep emotional wound, the abandonment by his mother. Unable or unwilling to care for a sickly and disfigured child, she left the family. Heaulme was placed in the care of his paternal grandmother, a woman remembered not for her warmth, but for her cold, rigid discipline. In her home, he learned a brutal lesson. Emotional needs were irrelevant. He was provided with food and shelter, but the fundamental human necessities of love, affection, and comfort were entirely absent. This emotional aridity became the bedrock of his psyche. As a boy, he was a natural target for bullies. His strange appearance and awkward demeanor made him an outcast. The state eventually intervened, placing him in a series of institutions for maladjusted youth. These were not centers for healing, but warehouses for children society didn't know what to do with. In these impersonal environments, Heaulme's isolation calcified. Psychologists who observed him noted his affective deficiency, a clinical term for his utter inability to form emotional bonds or understand the feelings of others. He could intellectually understand social rules, but he could not feel the empathy that gave them meaning. By the time he reached adulthood and was declared unfit for military service, the essential components of the future killer were in place. A rootless, emotionally void man, carrying a deep, unarticulated rage, and equipped with no moral compass. As a young man, Heaulme perfected his lifelong identity, the permanent nomad. He shed the constraints of a fixed address, a job, or lasting relationships. He became a phantom of the French transportation system, a master of hitchhiking and hopping freight trains. His world was the network of highways, train stations, and homeless shelters. He survived through a portfolio of petty crimes: theft, shoplifting, forgery, and defrauding social services. To the police, he was a recurring nuisance, a name in a file of minor offences. They saw a small-time drifter. They did not see the nascent predator beneath the surface. The violence began to leak out in unprovoked sudden assaults. But the first murder definitively linked to him occurred on November 4, 1984, in a forest in Morieux, Brittany. Heaulme was travelling with Jerome Caron, a 24-year-old with a slight physical disability. As they walked together, something in Heaulme's mind snapped. For a reason that would never make rational sense, he was overcome with the need to eliminate his companion. He picked up a large rock and bludgeoned Caron to death with savage, relentless force. When asked later, his motive was baffling in its triviality. He was walking too slowly. It annoyed me. After the killing, Heaulme did not panic. He exhibited a chilling pragmatism. He simply walked to the road, hitched a ride to the next town, and continued his journey. The murder was not a crime of passion. It was an act of disposal. This pattern of random explosive violence became his horrifying signature. He did not hunt. He simply encountered, and sometimes he destroyed. The Tinera's double murder, August 29, 1906, in the Lozère region, Heaulme shared a campfire and a meal with two cousins, Pascal Olive and Thierry Bosch. They spent a congenial evening together. The next morning, as Pascal cooked breakfast, a silent trigger was pulled in Heaulme's mind. He picked up a stone and smashed Pascal's skull from behind, then turned and killed Thierry in his tent. The violence was absolute and without reason. Afterwards, Heaulme methodically washed the blood from his hands in a nearby stream, collected some useful items from the camp, and walked away. His detachment was as complete as his violence. The murder of Marilyn Reeves. July 31st, 1987, in La Rochelle, Heaulme met a 21-year-old woman in a bar. She perhaps felt pity for the odd, lonely man and agreed to a walk. For an unfathomable reason, Heaulme led her to a secluded area and stabbed her 17 times. During interrogations, he would recall the event with photographic, yet emotionless, detail: the type of knife, the colour of her dress, the weather. The emotional content of the memory was zero. The murder of the Belgian camper. August 8, 1989. This killing highlighted the transactional nature of his violence. After meeting a Belgian tourist, André L., Heaulme accompanied him to his campsite, killed him with a hammer, and then robbed him of a small amount of cash to buy a train ticket. The murder was a practical step to fund his continued wandering. For years, these crimes were isolated puzzles in separate police jurisdictions. Local investigators, looking for motives like jealousy or greed, found nothing. They failed to see the common thread: a killer with no connection to his victims, for whom murder was a meaningless, impulsive act. The breakthrough came from a single brilliant mind, Captain Jean-François Abgral of the Brest Gendarmerie. Abgral was an intellectual detective, fascinated by criminal psychology and pattern recognition. He noticed a similarity in a series of senseless murders across different regions. The victims were different, but the crimes shared a core profile: extreme violence with a random object, no robbery or sexual assault, and no link between victim and killer.